Let's talk about lab safety in the ECE 1013 lab. Lab safety actually begins before you go to the lab. You need to remove any loose jewelry and trinkets, including rings, which could come in contact with exposed circuits and cause a safety hazard. It's best to just leave them at home. Don't wear any really loose-fitting clothing, sweaters, or jackets that could catch fire. And for fire safety, you must absolutely keep the lab door closed at all times. There are no exceptions to this. When you enter the lab, you're going to scan your ID for entrance. The ID scan will be used for taking attendance, so this is mandatory. You are to allow no unauthorized individuals access to the lab. If they have their own ID, then they have access to the lab. If they don't have an ID, do not let them in. When no labs are scheduled, you're permitted to come into the lab to practice. Keep in mind, cameras are on in the labs 24/7. Let's talk about setting up your workstation. First, you're going to wipe down the workstation. You're going to wipe down any fume extractors and the soldering mat. Just for your information, fume extractors and soldering mats are required when you're soldering in the lab. When the soldering iron is not in your hand, it must be kept in its stand at all times. Under no circumstances should it be laying down. It cannot be laying down on the soldering mat. It cannot be laying down on a table. It must be in a stand. This is to avoid a fire hazard. Your workstation needs to be kept neat and clear of any tools or equipment that are not required for the current experiment. During the lab, you're going to adhere to the IEEE Code of Ethics at all times. Section 1 of those ethics says to uphold the highest standards of integrity, responsible behavior, and ethical conduct in professional activities. Section 2 is to treat all persons fairly and with respect, to avoid harassment or discrimination, and to avoid injuring others. Section 3 is to strive to ensure that this code is upheld by colleagues and co-workers. During the lab, you're going to adhere to the MSU Honor Code at all times. The Honor Code states, as a Mississippi State University student, I will conduct myself with honor and integrity at all times. I will not lie, cheat, or steal, nor will I accept the actions of those who do. During the lab, you must conduct yourself in a responsible professional manner. Consider all circuits to be electrically hot unless proven otherwise. You do not need to have food or drinks at your lab station, and you must definitely not access, touch, or use the 3D printers. In the event of a lab accident, you need to report the hazard to the lab instructor immediately, who will help you figure out what to do next. You must also report any potential hazards that you observe as well. At the end of your lab time, you need to return all materials and tools to their proper places to keep the lab area tidy. Wipe down your lab space, and then report any damages to equipment to the lab instructor. Violation of lab rules will result in an MSU Honor Code violation and/or criminal charges. So let's just remember safety first.